All right, everybody, welcome back. Today we're meeting with Ryan Lesson. We had a meeting about a week ago, and that was fantastic. And Ryan's a very experienced engineer, and he also runs a consulting company. And so it's a perfect person to bounce some of these higher level ideas off of, and just to get your feel of the market, and you can shed some light on these things for us.
Yeah, happy to be here, man. We definitely had a great conversation last time, and I really feel like we ended it a little early because you and I could just talk for hours on so many different things in tech and life, and it could just go on and on. So happy to be here. Real quickly about myself, been in the tech industry for 10 years, and come last spring, my side gig of tech consulting quickly became my full-time gig after I was laid off. So since then, been running my full-time gig, and yeah, just hustling out here to try to make the startup explode. In the consulting business, it's always crazy. There's always things to deal with. I find my role being less developer and more everything, the meta of the business, the selling, the marketing, the accounting. It's just you wear every hat. It's not many different hats, it's every hat possible I have worn, I feel like. But yeah, it's been good, man, and happy to be here.
Happy to have you. That's actually a perfect segue because this is one of the big things I wanted to talk to you about last time. So you said that you transitioned. I would like you to tell me what that transition was like, because I know that when I got laid off, I had a lot of people around me saying, well, why don't you just work for yourself? And I had a terrible experience meeting with clients and trying to get clients as a freelance developer.
Mhm.
And primarily the problem was that I was consistently getting people who had already worked with overseas developers, and they had this notion in their head that if they're paying more than $7 an hour for development, then they're getting robbed. So how do you deal
Seven
with that?
dollars is getting around nowadays. I hear $2. So yeah, for me, kind of getting started in it is this was something that was a side gig for many years, and most people that work at companies, especially larger companies, if you look in your contract, what you'll see is something that basically says, they don't want you in competing business. So how did I run this? I essentially ran this business as a side gig for years, and I took no money from it because taking money from it, all of a sudden it goes from being a hobby to becoming a competing business that you're running, and that could lead to you getting fired. So that's kind of how I ran it. It really got started with word of mouth. When we went up to find our first website client, it was actually a law firm. And the great thing that we realized is like law firms, doctors, anything, financial advisors, some of them that deal with, high net worth individuals, they have a lot of money to spend. They're not as particular about the development. I know you said a lot about offshoring there. And trust me, I could talk about offshoring forever. If you see my channel, you could see there's tons of videos about me talking about offshoring and the craziness of that. But these people, they don't care about, the price as much. It's not as much of a deal breaker if the price is, I guess, it's not priced at, I could say a lot of things about what it could be priced at. I don't want to call it slave wages because it's really not living wages, but essentially as low as you could possibly be, like minimum wages.
Yeah.
So that's how we got our start. And then, yeah, just kept building from there. And then eventually, we caught fire, just building good, websites to building full-fledged applications, then to, a lot of AI development we've been doing lately, then, build, show it off, and then keep kind of monkey branching from there onto the next project, the next opportunity.
That's a good answer. And I think that I had this experience with multiple clients where or potential clients, I should say. I'd never had any paying clients, but they would come to me in the very first meeting. I could tell that they were asking me to do something impossible. And that usually included listing a bunch of multi-billion-dollar companies. And they're like, okay, imagine Airbnb and Uber and TripAdvisor and this all in one. And I want you to work for $4
It's
an
like
hour.
it's like the Airbnb of parking. Everyone could pick their parking spot and reserve it all on the app.
Or
There's
they
a lot
or
of
they mentioned
a lot of
some
people love telling you about their apps, man. It's crazy.
Or they mention some tiny country and they're like Angola doesn't have Uber yet, so we're making Uber for Angola. I was like, this is so weird and so random, and people come to you with their dreams, and a lot of them are just going to stay dreams. So I do want to talk about offshoring and outsourcing, especially in an environment where AI is, it feels inevitable. It feels like a rising tide, and I feel like we've got cinder blocks attached to our feet, and I feel like it's only a matter of time. You know, some of us are taller than others, and we won't drown as quickly, but it doesn't seem so. I want to get your
Mhm.
take on outsourcing, and not just like the vague future of software, but like this immediate generation for the next, let's say, 25 years. What do you see as
Yeah.
like the value of human labor and where that's going?
Gotcha. So I could go on and on about outsourcing. I go on and on about the current generation. I guess I'll kind of go, give good answers to both of these, and then we could kind of dive deeper. So outsourcing, it's very appealing. I mean, even me, hiring people to work at my consultancy agency, you see these wages they're offering. It's enticing. Every company's like, wow, I could get experienced developers for such great prices. And really, the education you see overseas, and obviously India is probably the biggest, exporter of, offshore developers. They basically have whole cities that are tech cities filled with developers. And it's true, they're raised with higher education standards. There's none of this BS you see in the United States where it's like, oh, this person wasn't smart enough to go to the next grade, but we didn't want to hold them back, so we pushed them through. That doesn't happen over there. There's competition over there. People. A big thing is in India, it's seen as a real high honor to be an engineer. From talking to a lot of my friends and colleagues over the years I met from India, and in America, it's just not the case. In America, it's more seen to be nerdy, more seen to be essentially something that you don't really want to aspire to. It's not, it's not the glamour of a doctor or a lawyer, which is that's what software engineers are held to in the same regard in India, per se. So that leads to tons of great engineers over there. I'm not saying there's not great engineers over there, but to think that those engineers, the best engineers in India or any other country are going to come work for your startup for $2 an hour, unless you're very lucky, it's not happening. They're either in the United States or another country where they're getting paid a ton more. And if they're very talented over there, the large companies scoop them all up.
I'm sure.
I mean, I've heard stories about Microsoft going into Hyderabad and offering, a pretty competitive wage there and basically taking all the talent. Everyone came and worked there. So to think that you as a smaller company, because again, I'm assuming a lot of these clients were smaller companies that you're working for. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. They were not just companies, a lot of them were just individuals, like some guy and his uncle
Mhm.
with, like, here's my idea. One client came to me after having just been robbed. He gave some group in Pakistan a couple grand for a full stack website, and they delivered just a static HTML
Mhm.
page that did nothing, had no functionality. And they first had me just as like a consultant. They're like, I'm not sure if I've been robbed. Have I been robbed? And I'm like, yes, you have. They delivered absolutely nothing. And then when I was like, I don't want $4 an hour, they were like, we're just going to go find another Pakistani group and have them fix the problem.
I know, and exactly, it's like they keep going on and on. It's like, oh, did this person do a good job? Probably not, because you're not paying wages that any good developer, no matter where they are, no matter what the cost of living is. Money talks. The great talent goes where the money is. It's
Yes.
you could get lucky. It's rare, but the end all there is for everyone telling you, oh, I'm finding everyone great over there. I'm doing all these great things overseas. It's unlikely unless you're actually paying good wages, really. So let's keep it there on outsourcing. So the current trends of AI, yeah, the current generation of developers are getting dumber. You're so abstracted now from things, you almost don't have curiosity. There's so many things to blame. There's social media killing attention spans. There's, we have everything done for you. Gone are the days where, I used to work in an IDE that, had no coloring. Like there was no like syntax highlighting of the stuff of, if it was a function, variable, and things like that. And that's how I coded for my first 2 years when I was in college. It's,
Which
nowadays
IDE
to
was
see
that?
that, I couldn't even tell you. It was one that was used for Python. I really couldn't even tell you what it was, but it was, once I found out that there was like Sublime, that was the text editor I used back then, I was like, all right, this is next level. But yeah, because of these things happening with AI, with how easy it is to do things, what's going to happen is people aren't going to be as smart. And that's kind of worrisome because it's a very similar trend as you see for other jobs, like, for example, some old carpenter, or I guess a good example is like a clog shoemaker. That whole thing's dying, but like a clog shoemaker is not as important as a software engineer. But you get what I mean? Like that experience is kind of lost to time because you just become too abstracted from it. And human nature is to be lazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's to get things done in the easiest way possible. So if AI is just going to do it, over time, people are just not going to take the time to learn.
And do you think, I'm optimistic toward AI, but I'm optimistic toward it in the sense of like extreme accountability. If somebody's using AI and they are using it to replace their own critical thinking, then it's definitely going to make them dumber. But I think that
Yeah.
AI responsibly used is just like a super powered version of Google. It's Google where you can interact with the results.
I don't even use Google. I don't use any search engines now. There's no reason to. It's all that's being replaced.
Yeah. Oh no. Google is passe, old school,
It is,
boomer
yeah, it's old
technology.
school. Exactly.
I think I have this idea of like societal responsibility, and it really links back to what you were saying about the Indian students and the expectations. We have such low expectations for people in Western society, and especially in America, and especially for young people. I was a teacher in China for a long time, and it's not that the Chinese students are smarter, they just have radically higher societal expectations. And
Yep.
they would be like ashamed to be uneducated. Whereas uneducated or less educated people in America are almost celebrated.
I saw like a news report where they were going, this lady, she graduated high school and then went to college at UConn or something, and it turns out she couldn't read. She was illiterate. But the thing is, they're, whatever failing public school she went to was just like, oh, let's just keep, we don't want to hold her back, let's just keep moving her forward. And they just never sat down with her and discovered, oh, you're illiterate, let's fix this, let's teach you how to read, and let's get you on the right track. No, they just kept telling her she was great, kept telling her she was doing everything right. And then once you get into the real world, where all this hand holding, all this coddling, all these color rooms are kind of gone. But at colleges, I see here they do have them. So maybe she's not fully in the real world, but she's realizing, wow, how could I have been put here? I've been put here to exactly do what you just said. It's just to move someone along and not care about the standards. The standards are so low in their self. It's just like, oh, you did the bare minimum of showing up to high school. Let's pass you and then get you accepted to a college.
Yeah. And better is not expected. I think obviously I wasn't alive in the 1950s, but on social media, it's really common to see excerpts from videos of interviews. And I've always thought that it's particularly interesting to watch young people, especially children, get interviewed. And there's this one video that sticks in my head where the interviewer is asking, they must be like middle schoolers, just asking them, what do you think the world's going to be like in 50 years? And they were giving answers that were so sincere and articulate. I wouldn't expect those types of answers from current college students.
Yeah. People be like, we'd be flying in spaceships and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, that's how people would be talking nowadays when you ask them. It'd be like on fleek, you know, saying all these jargon words and whatnot. You know, that's literally how, you know, the youth talks today. It's interesting.
It's nuts. It's bananas. All right. So I wanted to ask you about, well, actually, no, I want to expand on outsourcing. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm an optimist by nature, but I do like to explore more pessimistic alternatives. And the pessimistic side of my brain says that there's going to be very little that you can justify paying a human to do in 25 years. That the
Mm-hmm.
advancement of AI and robotics will simply reduce the value of human labor. And I have to ask myself, that's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to be a gradual. So from now till then, we'll slowly see a greater and greater decline of particularly disproportionately young people in the labor market. And it makes me ask, like, is there anything we can do in the next 25 years to at least guarantee the current young people to have some type of involvement? And that brings me back to outsourcing. I know at Deloitte, if I remember correctly, I think they said 70% of their developers were in India. That
Mm-hmm. Yep.
if
Makes
Deloitte's a big
sense.
enough company where it wouldn't surprise me if they have 10,000 developers working for them. That means 7,000 development jobs are in India for an American company. I'm not a
Yeah.
protectionist or an isolationist, but if we're cascading toward a future where nobody's labor has value, should we be taking extreme measures to at least guarantee that the young people today get one last generation worth of labor participation?
God, there's a lot to unpack there on the labor participation part. I
There
guess
really
I could
is.
kind of start with I could see jobs becoming easier and easier. Whereas, like today, like for example, you were saying you couldn't imagine someone being paid to be a prompt engineer in a video where they're just prompting AI to do things. You know, I could see that being a job where you're making over six figures
Wow.
in the future because that is everything, like all this work, everything being reduced is already taken care of by AI. And really, the only thing that humans could add is just prompting it to do something. I think that is maybe where it'll be. But then again, you could say, oh, well, then AI will get so smart, it'll prompt itself, and then we're useless. You know, I guess you can even go to that extreme.
Or it's just the client doing everything
I,
themselves.
yeah, I mean, a world like that where everything is taken care of for us, I mean, it's kind of hard to fathom what that would be like. But what I do see happening is jobs getting easier. You know, if you think of kind of just our generation, for example, you know, people were using horses to get around. Now they're using cars. You know, they're taking trains. Now most people take flights. You know, things get easier as time progresses. But are we going to see more extreme ones of that with how advanced technology is becoming? You know, Moore's law of everything kind of every 2 years, you know, I think it's every 2 years, the amount of like networking bandwidth or like memory, like in doubles or something similar to that. Maybe it's at a point where instead of doubling every 2 years, it's going to 10x every 2 years to a point where, I mean, the most basic of tasks today could be considered high level work in the future. Like that is
I
what
see.
big jobs are.
So you're saying like the dumbing down of things. So as human labor decreases in value, jobs will get easier by sort of an assistance of technology.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
That's
it's
an interesting
inevitable. And
concept.
you know, if you've seen Idiocracy, it's kind of similar to
Yes.
that movie where everyone just gets dumb. I mean, it's inevitable. I mean, again, you know, I brought up an example in a video I made. A perfect example is, you know, driving without using your phone to direct you. I know so many people today that can't go anywhere without Google Maps on.
Yes.
I mean, if there's a power outage or anything, they're stuck. They actually can't go anywhere. And it's crazy because I think of my dad. You know, how did you used to go on road trips? oh, we would have the maps out and look at that, and compasses. They probably didn't have compasses, but you know what I mean. They're doing all this. They probably did have compasses, honestly.
Well,
They're
they
doing
had the
all this to
car. You
direct
remember how cars had
themselves,
a built-in compass
to
back
their
in the day?
destination. Yes, I would see. That was what I was thinking of, because I
Yeah.
remember in the rear view mirror there was a compass there.
It's so funny. You just brought up such an old memory of the first time I drove a long way by myself. I was driving from Maryland to Jersey to visit my brother, and my dad wrote down some directions for me because this was back in the day of MapQuest. And so
Yep.
instead of MapQuesting it, he was like, I got you, no problem. And I didn't check what he gave me until the morning I was leaving. And the entire list of instructions was like 4 instructions. It was like, get on highway, drive to New Jersey, get off highway. And so, of course, I got extremely lost. But I'm becoming that person. I have an amazing sense of direction when I'm walking. When I get into a car, it's gone.
Can you drive to the airport without using GPS?
Yes, but that's only
Okay,
because
good.
I
That's
travel.
probably, that means you're actually pretty good at direction.
I feel like that's because I travel a lot, though. I fly quite a few times per year, and so I think if I was traveling like an average person, I wouldn't know the way.
Hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, so similar to that, I see happening, and we've seen it up to our generation, and now maybe it's going to be expedited into the future. So that's my take on that. And now I guess let's talk about thing. Um, it is weird to me, I will say. I've been at companies where their whole tech team is either outsourced or H-1B visa workers. I've been on, and it's almost never the opposite. It's always something like that. And yes, as we stated before, they have higher standards. A lot of them are really smart, but it's not everyone. The law of averages on IQ, not everyone could be a cracked level developer.
Mm-hmm.
It's really not possible. And I agree that if I were to make up a tech team, just to take, whoever's the smartest, obviously most of them would probably be Asian. But it wouldn't be all of them. It wouldn't be the levels we're seeing, like at Deloitte, where 70% are visa workers. It probably would be around 60%, but that makeup you see, when companies have 90% visa workers, or even when I was at Walmart, it was more like 98% visa workers in their development team. It was unbelievable. And I think they all can't be, not everyone here could be greater than developers from America. It's not possible. So, there's other incentives. They're the greatest employees you could have, as you have a lot of binding rules against them and things like that that make them, advantageous to have as a visa. And then outsourcing, again, the great talent outsource. If you just offer that type of money, I think it would probably be, you offer $100,000 a year to an engineer in India. Maybe it's not even that high. Maybe it's like $80,000 a year. You will scoop up everyone.
Yes, definitely. That's a radical salary in India.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think senior level developers usually make around like 25 to probably like 90,000 a year. And then it makes sense, like in the US, if you're working, let's say you're working at Apple in India, then all of a sudden you work for Apple in the US, you could be making 400,000 plus a year. I mean, every great developer most of the time will come to the United States. Like, I would pack my bags, go to another country too for, 4x the salary. It's insane.
Yeah. My favorite manager, because I had 4 managers at Deloitte. It really was. You've seen the movie Office Space, where he's got all these different managers. That was exactly what it was like.
It's filmed down the street from me here in Dallas, man.
And one of my managers was an Indian guy, and he was my favorite one. And he told me his story one day. We were at some company get together where because everyone was remote, so everyone flew to this one spot for this get together. And he was telling me about how lazy his son is because his son grew up in America. And he's like, I don't know why my son won't work harder. And then his son was complaining about something super very superficial. And he was
Yeah.
saying how when he first got a job in America, he literally didn't own a pair of shoes. He went from the level of poverty where he doesn't own a pair of shoes, and the first job he had in America was something hardware related in data centers. He was traveling around America doing data center maintenance, and he was just talking about what a radical difference it was. He wasn't even being paid well by American standards, but he was like obscenely wealthy by the standards of where he grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just and it was a fascinating story to hear. So, I don't begrudge anybody overseas. If you can get it, if you're from Pakistan or India, if you can get a job in America, do it.
Oh yeah, most people do, and it makes total sense. As a country, you want the best tech talent.
Yeah.
I mean, you get them. But a great point is this, and I've heard this, is if having a visa, program is the best way to get talent, why does a country like China not do that? Why don't they import visa workers by the thousands like we are doing? Maybe it's, again, I would think it's because not every worker is someone that's actually gifted, someone that's actually, it's a for people that come here that are actually, they're gifted, they're great workers, they're some of the best minds around. That is what the program wants. But then you look at other countries and you wonder why they're not doing it. So you wonder if it's even like doing its stated purpose of bringing in exceptional talent.
I think it's protectionism. And I think at a high level in China, there's just an acknowledgement that we, and the we being like Chinese government, Chinese business owners.
Yeah, Han Chinese. Yep.
We're going to hire Chinese people, even if there's a better candidate from India or Korea or wherever. We're going to hire Chinese people so that a Chinese person gets the job. And we're just going to eat the difference in quality. Like maybe they can hire 10 local Chinese guys and 5 of them are less skilled than the available talent from India. They're just going to eat the difference in skill, and they're just going to accept having a slightly less skilled team so that they keep all the jobs and therefore all the money in India or in China. And
yeah, kind of having just like a homogeneous, like everything's kind of the same. They want they're all exactly. They're very protective of who they are as people, and that's I get that, but that's what gives America such an advantage. Is really you're able to draw on the world for exceptional talent to come help you out. Because honestly, for building all these amazing things we're building, it's not going to come from the ideas of just people in California. It's going to come from the ideas of people all around the world converging in wherever they are to come up with these things.
I think that's definitely true with like H-1B visas, but when you're hiring people like Deloitte did, who they never come to America, they don't have a visa or anything. They're living in India and they stay in India and they're getting paid, probably better than an Indian salary, but way worse than an American salary. I think it's just supplemental cheap labor. And it's been interesting how my experience in Deloitte made me realize that like if there's a decision to be made between that same protectionist decision that the Chinese are making, do we go for what is strictly the best, or do we go for the sort of like nationalistic good? And I have a lot of respect for China just saying, you know what, we're just going to do whatever decision ensures the most labor participation for our own people.
I would say it's kind of misconstrued there, because I would not say if you're outsourcing, a lot of the time you're not pulling on the best of the world. You might think of, I'm able to just get the best talent. Like I could hire the same skill level engineer here overseas. I mean, it's not the case most of the time, unless you're actually paying a livable wage. But yeah, even on that scale, you're still paying, 4 or 5 times more for that engineer to be here than to be over there. Really, the way that it differs, and I've actually dealt with many companies that come to me and they say things such as communication's bad, team deliverables are bad. It's hard for at low companies. It's very difficult for any employee overseas.
Oh, you're freezing up. Oh, yeah, you're frozen completely.
They're not going to go above and beyond.
There
Sorry,
you go.
what did you
You're
say?
back. Sorry, you froze for a couple seconds there, about 5 seconds.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, let me kind of continue on that thought. But what I was getting at is these people overseas, a lot of the time, they're not going to go above and beyond to perform the role. They're going to be performing kind of the bare minimum because they're not going to have an identity with the company,
Sure.
unless maybe it's like a large company. But if it's not a large company, there's almost no identity there. So things you'll see here where, you'll have things in common, you'll share a lot of the same, like cultural American things to do or whatever. And guess what that builds? It builds camaraderie, and it builds, an identity, and it builds, the want of people wanting the company to come together and have it succeed. And that's what leads to great things happening. Because I guarantee you, almost everyone you kind of hire overseas for these prices, they're not going above and beyond. They're delivering the bare minimum.
And they're being given bare minimum jobs. Like I'd imagine that almost all of those overseas workers for Deloitte are doing the bare minimum, like JavaScript, PHP work. They're not given any like high level responsibility.
Interesting. Maybe that could be a good point. Or, with how some software is today, I could see them getting great work and just not really caring of, just writing the code. And who cares if it's illegible? Who cares if it's a monstrosity and so tightly coupled with everything else? You completed the task. You could close out the task and move on to the next task. Now, that's really all you care about.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. Another point I wanted to ask you about is so, and ask, tell me if this is appropriate, because a lot of what developers do is work on a deliverables basis. And that's also what tradesmen do. But there's such a different societal attitude between tradesmen and developers. Do you think that attitude should more align with, let's say, like a carpenter or a mason? And I mentioned this in a video that I made a little while ago, where I was talking about how, and this goes for any worker, if you haven't decided what your level of involvement is going to be, companies are just going to keep asking you to do more and more work, and they're going to keep expanding your role without paying you more, because it's in their best interest to get more work for the same amount of money. And it's very commonly the case that somebody will join a job and they'll share their role with 2 or 3 other people. Those people will leave, their workload will increase, but their compensation won't increase. And I mentioned in that video, I'm like, you have to have that conversation with yourself of where the line in the sand is, where you're going to say no. And I like to compare that to tradesmen. In no world would you hire a carpenter, agree to a job, and then expect him to do extra work for free.
Yeah, but a lot of the a lot of the time, there's a lot to unpack there. Let's kind of start from your first part of the question, which was the kind of like perspective of being a tradesman and being a developer. I would say up until maybe 10 years ago, maybe even less, it wasn't seen as something cool to have. There wasn't this person. Everything, it was, oh, it's some nerdy person. You didn't have the best reputation. It was kind of a negative connotation to be like, I'm a developer socially. You had no social. You couldn't. You had to have social status in other realms. You really only had social status in the developer community. And I see as a tradesman, you're more considered rugged. You're more considered handy. you know, up until obviously now it's kind of flip-flop where now developers with all these high salaries and things like that are seen as a very cool thing to be. It's actually wild. I remember, before I met my wife, I remember I would talk to women, they'd be like, "Oh, you're a developer, that's so great." They would think that's like the hottest thing to become a developer. When I started my career, that was never like, I would like avoid telling girls what I was doing because I was worried about that. So I think now being a developer is kind of viewed as, yeah, it's viewed more white collar, it's viewed more everything. But like you said, a lot of the time, like companies love doing this. Someone gets fired or they leave or whatever, and instead of replacing them, why not have you take their job as well
Yeah, yeah.
for no pay raise? It happens all the time, man. It's it's
And so
it's the absurdity. Yeah, go ahead.
and so why do you think that is from like a societal psychological perspective? Is it the rugged nature? If you ask a mason to build a wall in your backyard in your garden and you shake hands and you decide on an amount, how big the wall is going to be, how many bricks it's going to take, how long it's going to take to build, what it's going to cost. You shake hands, you make an agreement, and then you go, actually, I actually need another wall over here. Nobody on earth would expect the mason to build that wall without being paid
Yeah,
for it. But there really is that expectation in the tech industry, I think, where
yeah.
you might agree to a job, but there's an understanding that like what's on paper is definitely not going to be the full scope of your role.
Yeah, I mean, when we sell like a contract to someone, or like we're trying to sell like this promotion where we're trying to do like free websites for people, and we pick up some fees on the hosting for that. But even those, we have to have a super clear defined scope of work. And even then, even with a clear defined scope of work, clients still demand more than that a lot of the time. It's, oh, this isn't perfect. Oh, this isn't whatever. I just think it might be like I could speculate on this. I wish I kind of had a better insight on this, but to speculate on it, I would just say that tradesmen have been around for thousands of years,
Yeah.
doing work, getting paid for it. And it's just ingrained in business. And with, software development being newer in like the history of, you know, our working civilization, it's not seen as something where you could like charge for every little thing. I guess it's not considered work because again, like the ruggedness, you have to build another, like you said, whatever it is, like you build a fence and they go, oh, I want you to now paint it a different color. Like, you're out there, you're manually working, they could see that. And maybe that's why, compared to, you're not going to watch the developer sit at his computer
Mhm.
and write whatever code iteration change you need.
And even if you did, you wouldn't understand it. That's my theory, is that
Mhm.
it's too mysterious. Somebody who, literally a child, can comprehend a mason's job. I stack the
Mhm.
bricks and now there is a wall. But like a significant part of the tech industry doesn't understand a developer's job. Forget about the average person. Like we literally might as well be casting spells at the computer. It would be just as esoteric.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, I think
Yeah, no, I
it's,
think, I think,
yeah.
yeah, you're right. The mystique of it, like not knowing what's going on, it's like it's hard to say, oh, this is going to take extra. We're like, oh, can't you just do this? Can't this just happen? It's, I think that's why. And yeah, selling in my business of, trying to sell, things we're building like websites or trying to sell applications, it's very difficult for the non-technicals to kind of understand. And we go to absurd lengths of breaking down what everything is line by line of like what we're doing, what's our estimate, how much it will cost. And it's funny because one of my neighbors here, he does bathroom remodelings or whatever. And what he does is he just goes 50K whenever someone wants it or something. He just says 50K. There's no line by line. There's no details. It's just, I need someone to come and help remodel something in my bathroom. Okay, 50K. And they say yes, and he goes out there. So that is crazy to me, that just how much detail and explanation things you have to have just for someone to buy software compared to buying a bathroom remodel or something similar.
Yeah, my neighbor's a handyman, and I was talking to him about his work like 6 months ago when I moved in here, and he's like, "Yeah, I used to work hard, but then I realized that I could just be like mounting televisions, and when people ask me how much it costs, I just say $500, and you go, "Yep," okay, there, and they just give him the money. And I have an uncle in construction. He always used to say that you never give them a round number so that it makes it sound like you actually considered it. So instead of 50,000, you'd be like $51,220. So it makes it sound like he considered it, even though he didn't.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, it's I don't know. I think maybe over the years it'll get better, or maybe it won't. Maybe AI is just going to replace everything, and this is not going to be a job anymore. But it's a real problem. How much due diligence they need to do, and then how much you need to information you need to provide to kind of even move forward on the smallest of things. So, you said a lot of people are like, "Why don't you go solo?" That's one of the issues with going solo as a developer is how hard it is to sign clients. There's only so much in your friend and family group that you could really sign. Maybe not none, maybe one or two websites you might be able to do. But then it goes, how do you show off that work and get the next client? We send out estimates all the time. All the time. And actually, thank God for AI, because guess what? We're able to now streamline that process.
Yeah.
So that's another, you say using it to be like a 10x developer or whatever. That is what's happening. If you take the time to, give your, the LLMs context and all that, they're able to do great things for us. So, now I would say our estimates are more, granular than ever that we've ever presented to people. They go into so much depth. We could go over every technology, everything we're doing, and still there's pushback. And even with the free website offer we're doing, there's still pushback. We were talking to someone that told me, they're paying $75 a month for their website, and I'm like, okay, we charge a tiny bit more than that, but we build the whole website for free. You had to build this website, and they go, I don't know, doesn't seem like I want to do that. It's tough.
Free? That's unreasonable.
I know. I was thinking they're gonna be like, shut up and take my money. I think that's what they were gonna say, but people just don't move fast on software like they do. For example, anything like if my AC went out of my house or any repair of my house, the guy's coming over the next day and he could say $500, or what'd you say, $501.99. It's paid. It's not even thought of. But when someone has a website that's so bad that doesn't even work, that literally 404s on every page, whatever. We'll get to it eventually.
Hey, that includes giant corporations. Multi-billion-dollar corporations have just barely functional software for decades.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I'll never forget that. I think it was actually Blizzard. They make Warcraft and World of Warcraft and whatnot.
Yeah.
No, it was some game off of Steam. I think maybe it was Warhammer. Anyway, I was trying to download the game, and the download button led to a different page. I was like, okay, for some reason, this download button leads to a different page with another download button. I press that download button, it goes to the first page. It was just an endless loop, and you never download the game. I was like, who made this? And they paid for this.
Yeah, that's wild. That's yeah, I've had my issues with Steam as well, man. I feel you.
All right. We got about 15 minutes left. So I got a whole list here. We're going to have another meeting for sure.
Yeah, definitely, man.
I'd like
Do you mind if I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Cool. I guess, let's ask a fun question. So for me, I've always used some form of PEDs when I've been coding, especially when, deadlines are needed to be met. May that be
performance enhancing drugs?
Yes. May that be, 500 milligrams of caffeine. May that be nicotine. May that be Adderall. May that be, smoking weed, all those things. Do you think, and I will say this, doing that has helped me really become the same developer I am today, because how hard work has been, it takes the edge off a lot of the time. Have you kind of experienced using any PEDs with development work you've done in the past? And do you think that it's going to become more normalized? Like, for example, finance bros, they're like, the perception is, oh, you go out all night, you're doing a bunch of drugs, and you're up the next morning working. I'm wondering if coding kind of might get into that with the stress level of these jobs.
That's a good question, because I can say that one of the most degenerate but productive schedules I've ever had in my life was when I learned software during quarantine. So this was my schedule. Okay. I would wake up at 3:30 in the morning. I would not turn on the lights. And if I could help it, I wouldn't open my eyes, and I would shuffle to the bathroom in the dark, pee, go back into my bedroom. Next to my bed, I would have a 30 milligram Adderall and a big glass of water. And I would take the
Yep.
Adderall,
Oh yeah.
pound the water, and then get back into bed. And another alarm would go off at 4 a.m. So now I've got an empty bladder. I quenched my thirst. I've got the Adderall in my system. I'd go right down into the basement, and I would do squats. And because I knew that I was going to be sitting for the next 15 hours. So I would hit a leg day every morning. And then I would just sit in the computer for 15 hours and spend the rest of the day banging my head against the JavaScript wall. And I did that for 5.5 months to get my first job. And I don't know if I could have done that without Adderall.
Yeah, no, I kind of have some of the same stories. I mean, I remember some of the toughest like deployments I had to do, or some of the toughest deliverables I've had to meet. I would get completely baked out of my mind, and then just start coding. And then I'll start coding at like 3 p.m. and then I'll look down and it's 10 p.m. and I'm just finally pushing what I have to production. It's all test passing and everything's ready to go, and it's ready to be pushed. But without those, PEDs, I don't think I could have been here either. I really do believe that. May that be weed, may that be Adderall, may that be copious amounts of caffeine or nicotine. I feel that it's kind of like, I wouldn't say it's accepted in the industry, but I feel like it could very easily become, again, like those finance bros or just other industries where it's like kind of part of the job. It's to be a degenerate, because you are abusing your body.
Yes.
Sitting down for 15 hours a day, you're abusing your body. If you're not taking care of yourself, you could very easily, cause long-term health issues.
Oh, yeah. I forget who I heard say this, but they said sitting is the new smoking. I heard that years ago, and I haven't stopped saying it.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Sitting is brutal. It's so bad for you. And so, right now I'm sitting down. I almost never use this chair. When I'm actually coding, I'm laying down. I should send you a picture of what my lay down setup looks like.
Oh, please do, man.
And then this that I'm sitting at right now is a sit-stand desk. So if you're sitting 15 hours a day, you might as well be like a truck driver. That's horrible for you. That's so bad. And not to mention staring at a screen for 15 hours. Also, the mental effort cannot be understated. When you're working on something difficult, it's basically a 100% mental effort. And I appreciate the David Goggins of the world, who are like, I'm going to get on the treadmill, I'm going to run until I die.
It's 4 a.m. I'm out here busting it, going out here, lifting weights, doing everything, sleeping.
I wake up before I go to sleep, gargle piss.
That's my mouthwash.
But I will always have more respect for mental effort, because what we do as developers, emotion will never help you be a better developer. Whereas if you're running, I bet it's useful to be angry. I bet it's useful to be sad. If you're lifting weights, it's useful to have emotional distraction. When we're developing, you can't afford to be thinking about like your girlfriend just broke your heart or your dog just died, or you can't be thinking about how hungover you are or how tired you are. You can't be thinking about 100 other things. It takes such a it monopolizes your mental um I don't know, like uh, interaction, let's say, for lack of a better word.
Mhm.
And it's such a it's such a strain. It's such a brain strain. It's really underrated. And it's that might go back to the whole perception thing of it being like nerdy. Like people respect somebody who goes and runs 20 miles. They respect that person a lot more than somebody who sits at a computer for 20 hours and hammers some shit that's incredibly difficult.
Yeah. Yep.
But you're right. I think the abuse of these PEDs is rampant in the industry, and it might not be something that's talked about, but it's everywhere. I
Do you know like the meal replacements? That's another thing I hear. The biohacking where developers are like, oh, like to perform my best, like I don't eat any solid food. I'm drinking all my meals so I don't have
I
to
drink
waste
my
30 minutes
breakfast.
eating lunch.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
oh yeah.
yeah.
All these biohacks, like all these things people are doing to get ahead. It's crazy.
Shit, I think I just deleted the picture because I sent it to a buddy of mine. But yeah, my usual breakfast will be a protein shake, a pickle jar of black coffee with just a touch of whole milk, and sometimes a Guinness.
Like an actual pickle jar?
Yeah, yeah, an actual pickle jar. And
That's
so
awesome.
that's like 800 calories, like 70 grams of protein, a couple hundred milligrams of caffeine. And then usually I buy those caffeine pills from CVS. So the only
Oh, dude,
coffee,
those are, yeah, that's what I was talking about when I said
200
the
milligrams a
500. You
piece.
pop a couple of those, man,
Yeah,
you're flying.
those are not messing around. I think Adderall is a miracle drug, and I think it's a conspiracy that it's illegal, that it's like Schedule 1 or whatever schedule it is. You know, I
No,
think
yeah, it's medical, so it's got to be at least scheduled 2 or something.
Schedule 2, yeah. I think in a world where pharmaceutical industry didn't profit by selling the alternatives, Adderall would be sold at CVS for pennies on the dollar because it's a naturally occurring chemical. It's in all of our brains already. It's ultra effective. It's ultra safe. I mean, I was prescribed Adderall when I was like 14. Most of our
Yeah,
generation
yeah.
was. And I think the only reason it's not widely available is because pharmaceutical industries will lose a ton of money. But, you
Yeah,
know,
no, I mean, you guys look who's losing money. That's usually the answer to all those, why isn't something here? Why isn't this easily available? It's all money,
yeah.
really.
I mean, if you could buy testosterone at CVS, the entire antidepressant industry would collapse, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, shoot, man, I'm gonna probably hop back on TRT well, I wasn't doing TRT per se. I was doing some testosterone shots. It's an absolute game changer,
Oh, yeah.
especially mentally. You are so focused. It's, I would say if when I'm 35, I'll probably get on it. And it's just like, again, like you said, it's going to cure depression. You're not going to wake up sore as heck every single morning. And your psyche is usually great if you're not abusing it.
Yeah.
Like your brain function is through the roof. You're like Superman in a sense. It's amazing. Why isn't this readily available to all these men that have the testosterone levels of like 80-year-old men in their 30s? It's
Yes.
insane. Why is
Yeah.
it not available? It's crazy.
And that was me. I've been on TRT for a couple of years now. At 27 years old, I had 220 nanograms per deciliter, which is like a 80-year-old man. And as soon as I got on it, the second
Mm-mm.
week of shots, it was like a 180-degree difference in my psychology. I felt amazing. I had actually, it was like the boiling frog where you don't realize how bad things have gotten. The second week of shots, it was like it was like meeting an old friend that you haven't seen for years, but
Yeah,
you're
yeah, it's like
meeting
your
yourself.
20-year-old self. Yeah.
Yeah, you're meeting who you used to be. You're like, oh my god, I didn't realize how irritable I was. I didn't realize how emotional I was. I didn't realize how frustrated I was all the time. I
Mm.
didn't realize how low energy and how low motivation I was. It was
The
oh,
low energy is such a big part.
it's
That was
brutal.
one of the most drastic things was things that I was like dreading doing all of a sudden were just second nature. Just like done. You just get it done, whatever it is.
Yeah. And sleep quality is crazy. You can get the exact same amount of hours of sleep, but if you have healthy testosterone, you feel fantastic.
Absolutely, man. I mean, that's no, add that to the list of PEDs, man. I mean, it's all, it's all the money's hiding it. Like all the stuff that we need is all kind of, paywalled or, gate kept away from us. It
Yeah,
really is.
it is. Well, I mean, thank God for these TRT clinics. It's essentially impossible to get Adderall in Texas. Like Texas doctors just won't
Oh
give
my
it.
God. Vyvanse is so expensive. Don't even get me started on how expensive Vyvanse is. And usually that's the only thing these doctors prescribe. Like I tried to get a script here last year and they would only give me Vyvanse. And, it's $600-700 for like 3-4 months supply of it. I'm like, all right,
That's
yeah,
criminal.
maybe not.
Yeah, yeah. But the TRT clinic here will do TRT for $200 a month with no insurance. Beautiful,
Hmm.
beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, we got about 3 minutes left. Any closing thoughts?
Um, yeah, I think that if you are, worried too much about AI, you're worried too much about outsourcing, just don't, take a deep breath. These are things that you can't control. The If you spend your time becoming a great developer, you learn everything. You don't let AI make you dumb. You actually let AI teach you and you learn from everything that's happening. You ask questions, you're curious, and then you become this great developer from spending all this time. You won't have to really worry about a lot of things that are happening. Or like you said before, your analogy of, water coming and like some people are taller to like, breathe longer. You'll be the taller one with those skills. And I really think that, these things are not near future, at least. These are, could be a couple of decades away from happening. So really just stick to it, like learn what's going on and become the best developers you could be. And I almost guarantee that you will be able to be successful in this industry.
I couldn't agree more, especially with the curiosity. People who are curious and they're not allowing it to do their thinking for them, they're going to crush it.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you, Ryan, for coming on. I have no doubt that we'll be doing this again in a week or two. So I got a lot more questions.
Yeah, man. I much look forward to it. God, this was crazy day for me, man. My uncle was in town and he took me out drinking last night. We got a Sevens and Seven. Have you ever had that before?
No, what's that?
It's like Seagram 7 and 7 Up mixed together. It's like gin
Oh,
and Seven
nice.
Up. It's like an old man drink, but man, dude, that was a rough morning for me today.
That's the fun uncle, huh?
Oh yeah, when he comes to town, it's like, oh, we're gonna work out this morning. I had to call my trainer and be like, hey, we're scheduling.
I'm barely alive.
Exactly. I know. I'm immobilized. We're gonna have to wait on this. He's like, come here, we got a squad. I'm like, no, dude, it ain't happening.
Hell yeah. Thank you, man.
Cool, man. Yes. Take care.